The whip cracked through the winter air like a gunshot, and Beatrice Dawson felt the leather bite into her back for the third time that night, her knees buckling against the frozen wooden floor of the parlor as her stepfather stood over her with rage burning in his eyes. She was 19 years old, and this was the night her life would change forever, though she could not have known it as she gasped for breath and tasted blood on her lip from where she had bitten down to keep from screaming. The year was 1883, and in the high desert country of New Mexico Territory, winter came hard and unforgiving, especially to those cast out into its merciless embrace. "You worthless girl," Harold Marsh spat, his face flushed red from whiskey and fury. "Your mother's been dead 3 months, and you cannot even keep this house proper. You are nothing but a burden, eating my food, wasting my money." Beatrice tried to speak, to defend herself, but her voice caught in her throat. She had been cleaning all day, had prepared his supper exactly as he liked it, but nothing was ever enough for the man who had married her mother 5 years ago and shown his true nature only after the wedding vows were spoken. Her mother, sweet Mary Dawson, had died of pneumonia in September, and since then Harold had grown meaner with each passing week, finding fault in everything Beatrice did. "Get up!" he snarled, grabbing her by her long brown hair and yanking her to her feet. She stumbled, her simple cotton dress torn at the shoulder from his earlier assault. "Get out of my house. I am done with you. Please," Beatrice managed to whisper, her green eyes wide with terror. "It is freezing outside. I have nowhere to go." "Should have thought of that before you burned my biscuits," he said, though they both knew the biscuits had been fine. He dragged her toward the door, and she tried to grab onto the door frame, but he was too strong. The whip came down once more across her shoulders, and she cried out despite herself. He threw open the door, and the January wind rushed in, bitter and sharp with the promise of snow. Beatrice could see her breath in the air, could see the frost glittering on the ground outside in the moonlight. She was wearing only her thin dress and her stockings, no shoes, no coat, nothing to protect her from the elements. "No, please, at least let me get my boots," she begged, but Harold shoved her hard, and she tumbled down the 3 wooden steps to the frozen earth below. She landed on her hands and knees, the impact jarring through her bones, her palms scraping against ice-crusted dirt. "You come back here and I will shoot you," Harold said, and there was no doubt in Beatrice's mind that he meant it. She looked up at him standing in the doorway, the warm lamplight behind him making him look like a demon, and she saw him raise the whip one more time. It caught her across the face, a glancing blow, but enough to split her cheekbone. "Now get!" The door slammed shut, and Beatrice heard the bolt slide home with a finality that made her stomach drop. She knelt there in the dirt for a moment, shaking, her feet already going numb from the cold. The Marsh house was 3 miles outside of Aztec, New Mexico, a small settlement near the San Juan River where miners and ranchers tried to scratch out a living from the harsh land. It was full dark now, past 8 o'clock, and the temperature was dropping fast. She had to move. If she stayed here, she would freeze to death on Harold's doorstep. Beatrice forced herself to stand, wincing at the pain in her back where the whip had left its marks. She could feel something warm and wet soaking through her dress and knew she was bleeding. Her feet were bare, the stockings already torn through from her fall. And when she took her first step toward the road, the frozen ground felt like knives against her soles. There were no neighbors close by. The nearest ranch was 2 miles north, but she could not remember the family's name, only that they had a big herd of cattle and kept to themselves. The town was 3 miles south, down a rutted road that would be treacherous in the dark. Beatrice wrapped her arms around herself and started walking, each step an agony as rocks and ice cut into her feet. The moon was nearly full, which was a blessing. She could see the road ahead of her, winding through the scrubland dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. The mountains rose dark against the star-filled sky to the north, the San Juan Range where snow already capped the peaks. She had heard stories of people freezing to death in these parts, of prospectors found in the spring thaw, perfectly preserved in their icy graves. "Do not think about that," she told herself. "Just keep walking, one foot in front of the other." but it was so cold. Her teeth were chattering so hard she thought they might break, and she could no longer feel her toes. How long had she been walking? 10 minutes? 20. The lights of the marsh house had disappeared behind her, and there was nothing but darkness and sagebrush on all sides. She stumbled over a rock she had not seen and fell hard on her knees again, gasping at the pain. When she looked down, she could see blood black in the moonlight on the ground where her feet had been. "Help," she whispered, but there was no one to hear. "Someone help me." She tried to stand, but her legs would not obey. The cold was seeping into her bones now, making her drowsy. She knew that was dangerous, that falling asleep out here meant death, but she was so tired. The beating had taken everything out of her, and the cold was finishing what Harold had started. Maybe it would be better this way, she thought distantly. Better than being a burden to anyone else. Better than living in a world where the man who was supposed to protect her had thrown her out like garbage. Beatrice collapsed onto her side, curling into herself instinctively. She could not feel her feet at all now, could barely feel her hands. The sky above her was beautiful, filled with more stars than she had ever seen, and she found herself thinking of her mother. Mary had loved the stars, had pointed out constellations to Beatrice when she was a little girl. The Big Dipper, Orion's Belt, Cassiopeia. "I will see you soon, Mama," Beatrice whispered and closed her eyes. She did not hear the hoofbeats at first. They seemed to come from very far away, a rhythmic sound that might have been her own heartbeat. But then there was a voice, a man's voice, rough and urgent. "Whoa there, easy boy." The hoofbeats stopped. Footsteps running. Beatrice tried to open her eyes, but her lashes were frozen together. She felt hands on her, gentle hands, rolling her onto her back. "Oh, God," the voice said, and there was such anguish in it that Beatrice wanted to comfort him, this stranger she could not see. "Oh, God, what happened to you?" She felt him lift her, felt the warmth of his body as he held her against his chest. He was wearing a heavy coat, sheepskin maybe, and he wrapped it around her as best he could. She was shaking violently now, her body trying desperately to warm itself. "Hold on," he said, and she felt herself being lifted onto a horse. He climbed up behind her, keeping her cradled against him, and urged the horse forward at a gallop. "Hold on, miss, I have got you. You are going to be all right." Beatrice wanted to believe him, but she was so cold. She had never been so cold in her entire life. She felt consciousness slipping away again, felt the darkness pulling at her. "No, no, stay with me," the man said. His arms tightened around her. "What is your name? Tell me your name." "Beatrice," she managed to whisper. "Beatrice, that is a beautiful name. I am Kieran. Kieran Winters. We are almost to my place." "You are going to be fine, Beatrice, I promise you." She believed him. She did not know why, but she believed him. His voice was steady and sure, and his arms around her felt safe in a way she had not felt safe in a very long time. She let herself sink into that feeling. Let the darkness take her, because Kieran Winters had promised she would be all right. And somehow that was enough. When Beatrice woke, she was in a bed. Not her bed, not the narrow cot in the corner of the marsh house, but a real bed with a thick mattress and heavy quilts piled on top of her. The room was warm, blessedly warm, and she could hear the crackle of a fire nearby. For a moment she just lay there, confused, trying to remember what had happened. Then it all came rushing back and she gasped, sitting up too quickly. Pain lanced through her back and she cried out, falling back against the pillows. "Easy now," said a voice, and she turned her head to see a woman sitting in a chair beside the bed. She was perhaps 50 years old, with gray, streaked brown hair, pulled back in a bun, and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You are safe here, child. Do not try to move too fast. You have been hurt." "Where am I?" Beatrice asked. Her voice was hoarse, her throat raw. "You are at the Winters Ranch," the woman said. My son Kieran found you on the road last night. You were nearly frozen to death. She reached out and touched Beatrice's forehead gently. I am Margaret Winters. What is your name, dear? Beatrice Dawson, she whispered. Then, remembering, my feet, are my feet all right? Margaret's expression grew somber. They are badly frostbitten. We have been warming them slowly, the way you are supposed to. But I will not lie to you, Beatrice. The next few days will tell us whether you will keep all your toes. Dr. Garrett from town came out this morning and has been checking on you. He left some medicine for the pain. Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. She could not lose her toes. How would she work? How would she take care of herself? I am sorry, she said, though she did not know exactly what she was apologizing for. For being a burden, perhaps. For being found. You have nothing to be sorry for, Margaret said firmly. Now can you tell me what happened? Who did this to you? Beatrice hesitated. She did not want to speak ill of Harold, did not want to cause trouble. But Margaret's eyes were so kind, and the words came spilling out before she could stop them. She told her everything. About her mother's death, about Harold's growing cruelty, about the beating and being thrown out into the cold. By the time she finished, Margaret's face was pale with fury. That monster, she breathed. That absolute monster. You are staying here, Beatrice. You hear me? You are staying here as long as you need to. You are safe now. I cannot impose on you, Beatrice protested weakly. It is not an imposition. It is simple Christian charity. And if your stepfather has a problem with it, he can come talk to me and my sons. Margaret stood up, smoothing her skirts. Now, you need to rest. I will bring you some broth in a little while. You have not eaten in more than a day. A day? Beatrice had been unconscious for an entire day. She realized suddenly that it must be late afternoon by the quality of light coming through the window. I should thank your son, she said. Kieran, he saved my life. Margaret smiled. He has been checking on you every few hours, cannot seem to settle down, worried as he is. I will send him in when you have eaten something and are feeling a bit stronger. For now, just rest. Beatrice watched her go, then lay back against the pillows, staring up at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling. The room was small but clean, with whitewashed walls and simple furniture. Through the window, she could see mountains in the distance, purple and majestic against the blue sky. It was beautiful here, peaceful. She looked down at her hands, at the bandages wrapped around her palms where she had scraped them raw. Under the quilts, she could feel more bandages on her feet, thick and bulky. She wiggled her toes experimentally and felt a sharp, burning pain shoot up her legs. But she could feel them. That was something. Beatrice closed her eyes, exhausted despite having just woken up. She could hear sounds from elsewhere in the house. Footsteps, low voices, the clatter of pots and pans. Normal household sounds. Comforting sounds. For the first time since her mother died, she felt something almost like hope. Over the next 3 days, Beatrice drifted in and out of consciousness. The pain in her feet was excruciating at times, and Dr. Garrett came twice more to check on her progress. Margaret Winters was a constant presence, bringing broth and tea, helping Beatrice sit up enough to drink, changing the bandages on her back, where the whip wounds were healing slowly. You are lucky, the doctor said on his third visit, though his tone suggested he was using the word loosely. The frostbite is not as bad as I feared. You will keep all your toes, though a few of them look like they might lose the tips. Your feet will be tender for a long time, and you will need to be careful of infection. As for your back, well, those scars will be with you for life, I am afraid. But you will heal. You are young and strong. Beatrice did not feel young or strong. She felt broken and ashamed, lying in this strange bed, accepting charity from people she did not know. But what choice did she have? She had nowhere else to go, no money, no family except Harold, and she would rather die than go back to him. It was on the fourth day that she finally met Kieran Winters properly. She was sitting up in bed, dressed in a clean nightgown that Margaret had given her, eating a bowl of stew. Her feet were still wrapped in bandages and propped up on pillows, but the pain had lessened to a dull, constant ache. She was just finishing the last of the stew when there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she called, expecting Margaret. But it was a man who entered, and Beatrice knew immediately that this was Kieran. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked with his hands. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to his collar in waves that looked like they could use a trim. He had a strong jaw, shadowed with stubble, and when he looked at her, she saw that his eyes were the most startling shade of blue she had ever seen, like the sky on a clear summer day. He was holding his hat in his hands, turning it nervously, and there was something almost boyish in the gesture, despite the fact that he was clearly a grown man. Beatrice guessed he was perhaps 25 or 26, though it was hard to tell with cowboys who spent their lives in the sun. "Miss Dawson," he said, his voice the same rough, gentle voice she remembered from the road. "I hope I am not disturbing you. My mother said you were awake and feeling a bit better." "Please, call me Beatrice," she said, setting the empty bowl aside. "And you are not disturbing me at all. I wanted to thank you. You saved my life." Kieran shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking uncomfortable. Any decent person would have done the same. "But you are the one who did it," Beatrice said. "What were you doing out on that road so late at night? It was past 8 o'clock, was it not?" "I was coming back from town. I had gone in to pick up some supplies and stopped at the saloon for a drink with some of the other ranchers. Lost track of time." He finally moved closer, pulling the chair that Margaret usually sat in up to the bedside. "I nearly did not see you. You were lying in the shadow of a big sagebrush, and my horse almost stepped on you. But he shied away at the last second, like he knew something was wrong. Smartest horse I have ever had, that Duke." "I remember you picking me up," Beatrice said softly. "I remember your coat. It was warm." Kieran's eyes darkened and his jaw clenched. "When I saw you lying there, saw your feet bare and bleeding, saw the marks on your face, I have never been so angry in my life. I wanted to kill whoever had done that to you. My mother had to talk me down from riding back to Harold Marsh's place and beating him senseless. So they knew who was responsible." Beatrice supposed it had not been hard to figure out. "Please do not," she said quickly. "He is not worth the trouble it would bring you." "He deserves more than trouble," Kieran said, his voice hard. "He deserves to be horsewhipped himself and thrown in jail. What he did to you was attempted murder, plain and simple." Beatrice looked down at her bandaged hands. "No one would believe me over him. He is a landowner, a man of property. I am just a girl with no family and no prospects." "You have family now," Kieran said, and the fierceness in his voice made her look up in surprise. "My mother has taken a shine to you, and what my mother wants, she gets. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need. We have the room, and once you are healed, there is always work to be done on a ranch if you want to earn your keep. Though you do not have to. You can just rest and recover." Beatrice felt tears prickling at her eyes again. She seemed to cry at the smallest kindness these days. "I do not understand why you are being so nice to me. You do not even know me." Kieran reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took one of her bandaged hands in his. His hand was large and calloused, warm and strong, and Beatrice felt something flutter in her chest at the touch. "I know that you are brave," he said quietly. "I know that you survived something that would have killed most people. I know that you said thank you even when you were half frozen and in terrible pain. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of person you are, Beatrice Dawson." She stared at him, at those impossibly blue eyes, and felt something shift inside her. This man, this stranger, had seen her at her lowest moment and had not turned away. He had carried her home, had sat up worrying about her, and now he was offering her a place to stay with no expectation of anything in return. She did not know what to say. "Thank you," she finally whispered. It seemed inadequate, but it was all she had. Kieran smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "You are welcome. Now you should rest." Dr. Garrett said you need to stay off your feet for at least another week, maybe two. I know it is not easy being cooped up in here, but you have got to let yourself heal. "I will," Beatrice promised, "though I am already going a bit stir-crazy. I will bring you some books if you like to read. We have got a pretty good collection. My father was a school teacher before he took up ranching, and he believed in education. Pass that on to all of us." Kieran stood up, reluctantly releasing her hand. "I will let you rest, but I will come visit again tomorrow, if that is all right with you." "I would like that," Beatrice said, and meant it. After he left, she lay back against the pillows, her heart beating a little faster than it had been before. Kieran Winters was kind and handsome and had literally saved her life. She barely knew him, and yet she found herself looking forward to seeing him again. It was foolish, she told herself. She was in no position to be thinking about men, about romance. She needed to focus on healing, on figuring out what she was going to do with her life. But as she drifted off to sleep that night, it was Kieran's face she saw, his blue eyes and gentle smile, and she felt warm all the way through. The days fell into a comfortable routine. Margaret brought Beatrice her meals and helped her with the necessities of bathing and dressing that were difficult with bandaged feet. Dr. Garrett came by twice more and pronounced himself satisfied with her progress. The frostbite was healing, though, as he had predicted, she would lose the very tips of two of her toes on her right foot. It could have been so much worse. Kieran visited every day, usually in the late afternoon after he had finished with the day's work on the ranch. He brought her books as promised, and they discovered a shared love of adventure stories and poetry. He told her about the ranch, about the cattle and horses they raised, about his two younger brothers who worked alongside him. "Thomas is 22, he said. "Good with the horses, but terrible with numbers. And Jacob is 19, just a year older than you. He thinks he is going to be a big-time rancher someday, wants to expand our operation. Father left us the ranch when he died 2 years ago, and we have been doing our best to keep it going." "Your mother mentioned your father was a teacher," Beatrice said. They were sitting in her room, Kieran in his usual chair, and Beatrice propped up in bed with her feet still elevated. 2 weeks had passed since the night he found her, and she was finally starting to feel like herself again. "He was. Taught at a school in Santa Fe before he met my mother, but he always wanted to ranch, so they came out here when I was just a baby and started the winter spread. It was hard going at first, but they made it work. Father taught us all to read and write and do figures, said that was just as important as knowing how to rope a steer or break a horse. I am glad he did. Education opens doors." "I wish I had more of it," Beatrice admitted. "My mother taught me to read and do basic arithmetic, but that was all. There was no school close enough for me to attend, and after she married Harold, well, he did not see the point in educating a girl." "Harold is a fool," Kieran said bluntly. "Women are just as capable of learning as men, maybe more so. My mother runs the household accounts and does it better than any of us boys could." Beatrice smiled. She loved the way Kieran talked about his mother with such respect, such affection. It was clear the Winters family was close-knit and loving, everything her own family had never been. Her real father had died when she was 5, too young for her to remember much about him except that he had been kind. And then there had been Harold, who had been neither kind nor a real father. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked, and she realized she had fallen silent. "Just about how different things are here," she said. "How different you are from the men I have known. You are kind. You treat me like I matter." Kieran leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and looked at her intently. "You do matter, Beatrice. You matter a great deal." There was something in his voice, something in the way he was looking at her, that made Beatrice's breath catch. She had been trying not to think about the fact that she was growing feelings for this man, feelings that went beyond gratitude, but it was getting harder to ignore. Every time he walked into the room, her heart sped up. Every time he smiled at her, she felt warm all over. And when he touched her hand, as he sometimes did when making a point in conversation, she felt sparks run up her arm. Kieran, she started to say, but was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sorry to interrupt, Margaret said, poking her head in. Beatrice, Dr. Garrett is here for one more checkup. He says if everything looks good, you can start trying to walk a bit tomorrow. That is wonderful news, Beatrice said, though part of her was disappointed at the interruption. What had she been about to say to Kieran? She was not even sure. Kieran stood up, placing his hat back on his head. I will leave you to it then. I will see you tomorrow, Beatrice. See you tomorrow, she echoed, and watched him go. Dr. Garrett's examination was thorough. He unwrapped the bandages on her feet carefully, studying the healing skin with a practiced eye. Beatrice winced when he touched the tender spots, but overall, the pain was much less than it had been. You have healed remarkably well, the doctor said, sitting back with a satisfied nod. Better than I dared hope, to be honest. The scarring is significant, but you should have full function of your feet once the skin toughens up a bit. I want you to start walking short distances tomorrow, just a few steps at first. It will hurt, but you need to start building up strength again. Mrs. Winters, make sure she has someone with her when she walks, in case she gets dizzy or loses her balance. I will, Margaret promised. After the doctor left, Margaret helped Beatrice into a fresh nightgown and brushed out her long brown hair. It was a soothing ritual they had fallen into, and Beatrice treasured these quiet moments with the older woman. Margaret reminded her so much of her own mother, with her gentle hands and kind words. You know my son is sweet on you, Margaret said suddenly, and Beatrice nearly dropped the hand mirror she had been holding. What? No, I mean, we are friends. He is just being kind, Beatrice stammered. Margaret laughed. My dear girl, I have raised 3 sons. I know when one of them is smitten. Kieran has been different since he brought you home. Lighter somehow, happier. And the way he looks at you when you are not paying attention, well, it is the way his father used to look at me. Beatrice felt her cheeks flush. Even if that were true, I have nothing to offer him. I am penniless, homeless. I am damaged goods. You stop that right now, Margaret said sharply. You are a survivor. You are brave and kind and intelligent. Any man would be lucky to have you. And my son knows it. Now, I am not saying you have to return his feelings. You are young and you have been through a terrible ordeal. But do not sell yourself short, Beatrice. You are worth far more than you seem to think. Beatrice did not know what to say to that. She wanted to believe Margaret, wanted to believe that she was worth something, that she could have a future that included love and happiness. But it seemed like such an impossible dream. That night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, Beatrice let herself imagine it. Imagine staying here at the Winters Ranch permanently. Imagine Kieran courting her properly, the way a man courted a woman he intended to marry. Imagine becoming Mrs. Kieran Winters, being part of this warm, loving family. It was a beautiful dream, and maybe, just maybe, it could become reality. The next morning, Beatrice woke early, nervous and excited about the prospect of walking again. Margaret came in with breakfast and a pair of soft leather slippers that she said had belonged to her own mother. They are well worn and should be comfortable on your tender feet, Margaret said. We will start slow, just a few steps at a time. After breakfast, Kieran appeared in the doorway. Mother said you were going to try walking today. I thought I could help. Beatrice's heart did that strange flutter again. I would appreciate that. Kieran came over to the bed and offered her his arm. Ready? Beatrice took a deep breath and nodded. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, the bandages on her feet much lighter now, just thin wrappings to protect the healing skin. Margaret had helped her into a dress, one of her own that she had altered to fit Beatrice's slimmer frame. It was blue cotton, simple but pretty, and Beatrice felt more like herself than she had in weeks. She slipped her feet into the slippers and stood up slowly, holding tight to Kieran's arm. For a moment the world spun, and she thought she might faint. But then it steadied. Her feet hurt, a burning, aching pain that made her want to sit back down, but she gritted her teeth and took a step. Then another, and another. "That is it," Kieran encouraged. "You are doing great." They made it across the room to the window, maybe 10 steps total before Beatrice had to stop. She was breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead, but she was standing. She was walking. "I did it," she said, laughing a little. "I thought I might not ever walk again, and I did it." "I never doubted you for a second," Kieran said, and the pride in his voice made Beatrice's chest swell with emotion. She looked up at him, at his handsome face so close to hers, and suddenly the world narrowed to just the two of them. She could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could see the slight scar on his chin that she had never noticed before. His hand was still on her arm, steadying her, and she could feel the warmth of it through the thin fabric of her dress. "Kieran," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for, but knowing that something was happening between them, something important. He reached up with his free hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, feather-light. "Beatrice, I know this might not be the right time, and if I am overstepping, you just say the word. But I have to tell you, from the moment I found you on that road, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. You are the bravest, strongest person I have ever met, and I would count myself the luckiest man alive if you would let me court you properly." Beatrice's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. "You want to court me?" "More than anything," Kieran said. "But only if you want that too. I do not want you to feel obligated because we took you in. Your safety and happiness are what matter most to me." "I want that," Beatrice said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I want that so much. I have been trying not to hope for it because it seemed too good to be true. But yes, Kieran. Yes." The smile that spread across Kieran's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He took her other hand, holding both of them gently in his. "You have just made me the happiest man in New Mexico territory." "Should we tell your mother?" Beatrice asked, suddenly shy. "I think she already knows," Kieran said with a laugh. "But yes, we should probably tell her officially. And my brothers. They're going to be thrilled. They have both been telling me I need to stop mooning around and just talk to you." Over the next few weeks, Beatrice's strength returned steadily. She walked a little farther each day until she could make it from the bedroom down the hall to the kitchen without needing to rest. Her feet healed, the skin toughening up as Dr. Garrett had predicted, though they would always be sensitive to cold. The scars on her back faded to pale lines, still visible but no longer painful. And through it all, Kieran courted her with a sweetness and sincerity that made her fall more in love with him every day. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. He read poetry to her in the evenings while they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. He taught her to play checkers and pretended not to notice when she won. He was patient and kind, and never pushed her for more than she was ready to give. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. She learned that his favorite color was the deep red of the desert at sunset. He learned that she had always wanted to learn to ride a horse, but had never had the chance. He told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, of building a life here in this beautiful, harsh country. She told him about her dreams of having a real family, a real home where she was loved and wanted. "You have that now," Kieran said one evening, as they sat side by side on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders. "You are part of this family, Beatrice. My mother loves you like a daughter, and my brothers think you are wonderful. And well, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Beatrice turned to look at him, her green eyes wide. "You love me?" "I do," Kieran said simply. "I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Beatrice Dawson. I love your strength and your kindness and your laugh. I love the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love everything about you. I love you too, Beatrice whispered. And then Kieran was kissing her, soft and sweet and perfect. It was her first kiss, and it felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathless, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Beatrice. I know it is fast, and I know we should probably wait longer, but I do not want to wait. I want to spend every day of the rest of my life with you. Say yes. Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Winters. They told Margaret that night, and she cried and hugged them both and immediately started planning the wedding. Thomas and Jacob, Kieran's brothers, were equally delighted. Thomas, a stocky young man with their mother's brown eyes, shook Kieran's hand and told Beatrice she was too good for his older brother. Jacob, tall and lanky with a mop of unruly dark hair, just grinned and said it was about time. The wedding was planned for mid-March, giving them about 6 weeks to prepare. It would be a small ceremony, just family and a few friends from town, held at the ranch. Margaret threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm, sewing a wedding dress from white linen and lace she had been saving for years. But there was one dark cloud on the horizon, and that was Harold Marsh. Word had gotten around Aztec about what he had done, and public opinion had turned against him. Several of the townspeople had approached Kieran, offering to back him up if he wanted to press charges. But Beatrice was reluctant. I just want to move on, she told Kieran one afternoon as they walked through the pasture, watching the cattle graze. She was getting stronger every day, able to walk longer distances without pain. I do not want to relive that night in a courtroom. I do not want to see him again. I understand, Kieran said, though his jaw was tight with suppressed anger. But he should not get away with what he did to you. He could do it to someone else. Harold does not have anyone else, Beatrice pointed out. He is alone in that house, and from what I hear, even his friends have turned against him. That is punishment enough. Kieran pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. You are too forgiving. That is one of the things I love about you, but it also makes me want to protect you even more. Promise me, if he ever comes near you again, you will tell me immediately. I promise, Beatrice said, leaning into his embrace. She felt safe here in his arms, safe in a way she had never felt before. Whatever happened, she knew Kieran would stand between her and any danger. The weeks passed quickly, filled with wedding preparations and the everyday work of ranch life. Beatrice insisted on helping out however she could, and Margaret taught her to cook and bake, skills her own mother had started to teach her, but which Harold had discouraged. She learned to make bread and biscuits, to roast a chicken, and make a proper stew. She helped Margaret with the washing and mending, and slowly began to feel like she was earning her place in the household rather than just being a charity case. She also began to venture outside more, exploring the ranch with Kieran as her guide. The winter's spread was about 500 acres, with good grazing land and a year-round creek that provided water for the cattle. They had about 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses, plus chickens and a few pigs. It was not a huge operation, but it was successful and well run, a testament to the hard work of the Winters family. One sunny afternoon in early March, Kieran took Beatrice out to the horse corral. I want to teach you to ride, he said. You said you always wanted to learn. Beatrice looked at the horses nervously. They seemed very large up close. I do not know. What if I fall? Then I will catch you, Kieran said with a grin. Come on, I have got the perfect horse for you. He led her over to a pretty mare with a reddish-brown coat and a white blaze on her forehead. This is Cinnamon. She is gentle as a lamb and perfect for a beginner. Here, let me help you up. Kieran showed her how to put her foot in the stirrup and swing herself up into the saddle. It felt strange and precarious at first, being so high off the ground, but Cinnamon stood perfectly still, waiting patiently. Kieran adjusted the stirrups and showed Beatrice how to hold the reins. There you go. Now just squeeze gently with your legs and she will walk forward. Beatrice did as he instructed, and Cinnamon started walking sedately around the corral. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Kieran walked beside her, one hand on the bridle, talking her through it. That is it, you are a natural. Keep your back straight. Good. Now try turning her to the left. Just pull gently on the left rein. They spent an hour in the corral, and by the end of it, Beatrice was able to walk and turn Cinnamon without help. She was exhausted, but exhilarated when Kieran finally helped her down from the saddle. That was wonderful, she said, her eyes shining. Can we do it again tomorrow? Absolutely, Kieran said, pulling her close for a quick kiss. Before you know it, you will be galloping across the range like you were born to it. Life at the Winters Ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Beatrice found herself happier than she had ever been, surrounded by people who loved her and looking forward to a future that seemed bright and full of promise. The nightmares about that terrible night still came occasionally, but Kieran was always there to comfort her when she woke gasping and afraid. He would hold her and stroke her hair and remind her that she was safe, that Harold could never hurt her again. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, bright and warm with just a hint of spring in the air. Margaret had outdone herself with the preparations. The main room of the ranch house was decorated with wildflowers and white ribbons, and she had cooked a feast that would feed everyone twice over. The dress she had made for Beatrice was beautiful, simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a high neckline that covered the scars on her back. Beatrice stood in her room, staring at herself in the mirror. Her brown hair was pinned up with flowers woven through it, and her green eyes sparkled with happiness. It seemed impossible that just 3 months ago she had been lying in the snow, certain she was going to die. Now she was about to marry the man she loved, about to become part of a real family. It felt like a miracle. There was a soft knock on the door, and Margaret came in. "Oh, my dear," she said, tears already starting to flow. "You look absolutely beautiful. Kieran is going to lose his breath when he sees you." "I am so nervous," Beatrice admitted. "What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I forget my vows?" "You are going to be perfect," Margaret assured her. "And even if you do trip or forget something, it will not matter. All that matters is that you and Kieran are pledging your lives to each other. Everything else is just details." She came over and took Beatrice's hands in hers. "I want you to know how glad I am that my son found you that night. I know it happened in a terrible way, but I believe God brought you to us for a reason. You are the daughter I always wanted, Beatrice, and I am so proud to call you family." Beatrice hugged her tightly, crying now too. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for taking me in, for loving me. I do not know what would have happened to me if not for you and Kieran." "But it did happen," Margaret said firmly. "And now you are here, and you are safe, and you are about to marry my wonderful son. So dry those tears, and let us go make you a bride." The ceremony was simple and beautiful. The pastor from the church in Aztec performed the service, and Beatrice walked down the makeshift aisle on Thomas's arm, since she had no father to give her away. Kieran was waiting for her at the front, looking impossibly handsome in a new suit, his blue eyes locked on her with such love and devotion that Beatrice felt her knees go weak. They exchanged their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other for all the days of their lives. Kieran slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and she did the same for him. And then the pastor said those magical words, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Kieran cupped her face in his hands and kissed her tenderly, and Beatrice felt like her heart might burst with joy. When they pulled apart, everyone was cheering and clapping, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was music and dancing and more food than Beatrice had seen in her entire life. She danced with Kieran, with Thomas and Jacob, with several of the neighboring ranchers who had come to wish them well. Everyone was so kind, so welcoming, and Beatrice felt like she was floating on air. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Kieran took Beatrice's hand and led her away from the house. They walked out to the pasture, to a spot where they could see the mountains silhouetted against the orange and pink sky. Happy? Kieran asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Happier than I ever thought possible, Beatrice said, leaning back against him. Thank you for finding me that night. Thank you for giving me a life I never dared to dream of. Thank you for saying yes, Kieran murmured against her hair. Thank you for being brave enough to survive, to heal, to love me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Winters. Beatrice turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope for the future into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Kieran took her hand and they walked back to the house together, ready to start their new life as husband and wife. The first year of their marriage was full of hard work and small joys. Beatrice settled into her role as Kieran's wife and a full member of the Winters family. She learned more about running a ranch, helped Margaret with the household tasks, and continued to improve her writing skills. Kieran was patient and loving, always there with a smile or a word of encouragement when things got tough. In late summer, Beatrice discovered she was expecting their first child. She was nervous about telling Kieran, worried about what kind of mother she would be after everything she had been through. But when she finally worked up the courage to tell him one evening after supper, his reaction erased all her fears. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. We are going to have a baby. Beatrice, that is the most wonderful news. When? How are you feeling? Do you need to sit down? Should we send for the doctor? Kieran, calm down, Beatrice said, laughing. I am fine. The baby will be here in early spring. I saw Dr. Garrett in town yesterday, and he says everything looks normal. A baby, Kieran said again, his eyes shining with unshed tears. We are going to be parents. You are going to be a mother. And you are going to be a father, Beatrice said softly. A wonderful father. I know it. That night, lying in bed with Kieran's hand resting gently on her still flat stomach, Beatrice thought about how far she had come. A year ago, she had been broken and scared, certain her life was over. Now she had a husband she loved, a family who cared for her, and a baby on the way. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and Margaret had to take over most of the cooking because the smell of food made her ill. But Kieran was there every step of the way, holding her hair when she was sick, bringing her dry crackers and ginger tea, rubbing her feet when they swelled in the later months. As winter set in, and the anniversary of that terrible night approached, Beatrice found herself growing quieter. She could not help but remember the cold, the pain, the fear. She had nightmares again, waking up gasping and reaching for Kieran in the darkness. Talk to me, Kieran said one night after she had woken from a particularly bad dream. Tell me what you are thinking. I was just remembering, Beatrice said, her voice thick with tears. A year ago, I thought I was going to die. I was lying in the snow, and I thought that was it. That was how my life would end. And now I am here, safe and warm and loved, and I am going to have a baby. Sometimes it does not feel real. It is real, Kieran assured her, pulling her close. This is your life now, Beatrice. You survived that night, and you built a new life from the ashes of the old one. You are strong and brave, and you are going to be an amazing mother. Never doubt that. I love you so much, Beatrice whispered against his chest. I love you too, Kieran said, more than anything in this world. In early April, as the snow was melting and the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom, Beatrice went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted nearly 24 hours, and there were moments when Kieran thought he might lose her. moments when the midwife's face grew grim and she sent Thomas running for the doctor. But Beatrice was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and finally, just as the sun was rising, their son was born. He was small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and blue eyes like his father. Kieran held him for the first time with tears streaming down his face, looking at this tiny, perfect human that he and Beatrice had created together. "He is beautiful," Kieran said, his voice choked with emotion. "He is perfect. You did so well, Beatrice. I am so proud of you." Beatrice, exhausted but radiant, reached out for the baby. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the past few months, but had not been able to agree on anything. Now, looking down at their son, Kieran said, "What about Matthew? It means gift of God. And he is he not? A gift." "Matthew Winters," Beatrice said, testing it out. "I love it. Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby yawned and stretched, and Beatrice felt her heart overflow with love. This was her son, hers and Kieran's. A new life, a new beginning. Margaret was beside herself with joy over her first grandchild. She spent hours holding Matthew, singing to him, teaching Beatrice all the things a new mother needed to know. Thomas and Jacob were equally smitten, constantly competing to see who could make the baby smile first. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, life at the Winters Ranch continued its steady rhythm. Matthew grew from a tiny infant into a chunky, happy baby who loved to laugh and grab at anything within reach. Beatrice discovered that motherhood suited her, that all her fears about not being a good parent were unfounded. She was patient and loving, and Matthew thrived under her care. Kieran was a devoted father, coming in from the field several times a day just to check on his son. He would hold Matthew and talk to him about the ranch, about the cattle and the horses, about all the things they would do together when Matthew was older. Beatrice would watch them together and feel such a surge of love it almost hurt. 2 years passed, then 3. The ranch prospered under the management of the 3 brothers. They expanded their herd and bought more land from a neighboring rancher who was retiring. Beatrice gave birth to a daughter they named Lily when Matthew was 2, and then another son they named Samuel when Lily was 18 months old. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. On the 5th anniversary of the day, Kieran found Beatrice on the road. They took a walk together out to the spot where it had happened. It was a warm January day, unseasonably mild, and they left the children with Margaret for a few hours to have some time alone. Beatrice stood looking at the place where she had nearly died, and it seemed impossible that it was the same location. Then it had been frozen and dark and terrifying. Now it was just a dusty stretch of road with sagebrush on either side, ordinary and unremarkable. "I was thinking we should do something to mark this place," Kieran said, his arm around her waist. "Something to remember what happened here, and to celebrate how far you have come." "What did you have in mind?" Beatrice asked. "A marker of some kind. A stone with an inscription, maybe. Something that says, 'This is where our story began.'" Beatrice considered it. "I like that idea. What should it say?" "How about, here, on January 15th, 1883, love was born from darkness. Kieran and Beatrice Winters." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. "That is perfect. Let us do it." They had the stone carved in town and placed it at the spot together, cementing it into the ground so it would not be moved. It was a simple gray granite marker, but it meant the world to both of them. A reminder that even the darkest moments could lead to light, that survival was possible, that love could grow in the most unlikely places. As they stood looking at the marker, Kieran pulled Beatrice close. "I wish I could go back and tell that scared, hurt girl lying in the snow that everything was going to be all right. That 5 years later she would be standing here, healthy and happy, with a husband who adores her and 3 beautiful children. That she would have everything she ever dreamed of." "I think she would have had a hard time believing it," Beatrice said with a smile. "But she would have been grateful to know. Thank you for saving me that night, Kieran. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. You saved yourself, Kieran corrected gently. You are the one who survived, who fought through the pain and the fear. I just helped a little. The rest was all you, my brave, beautiful wife. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, their shadows stretching long in the late afternoon sun. Behind them, the marker stood silent witness to a night of terror and pain that had become a story of hope and redemption. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of family life. Matthew started helping with the ranch work as soon as he was old enough, showing the same dedication and work ethic as his father. Lily was quieter, more studious, and Beatrice taught her to read and write and do mathematics. Samuel was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but so charming that it was impossible to stay mad at him for long. Margaret grew older but remained spry and active, the heart of the household. Thomas married a girl from town, and they had 2 children of their own. Jacob, always restless, eventually left to try his fortune in California, though he wrote regularly and came back to visit every couple of years. Harold Marsh died when Matthew was 5. Beatrice heard about it from someone in town, how he had been found in his house, dead of a heart attack. She felt nothing when she heard the news. Not satisfaction, not regret, nothing. That part of her life was so far in the past, it was like it had happened to someone else. When Matthew was 10 and old enough to understand, Beatrice told him the story of how she had come to the Winters ranch. She showed him the marker on the road and explained what it meant. Matthew listened with wide eyes, then hugged her tightly. I am glad Papa found you, he said. Otherwise I would not be here. Neither would I, Lily added. She was 8 now, sharp as a tack. Me neither, Samuel chimed in, always wanting to be part of the conversation. Beatrice hugged all 3 of her children close, overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she had been given. I am glad too. So very glad. More years passed. The children grew into teenagers and then young adults. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch operations as Kieran began to slow down, though he remained active and healthy well into his 50s. Lily married a school teacher from Santa Fe and moved there to start her own family. Samuel decided to become a lawman and became a deputy in Aztec, determined to protect people the way his father had protected his mother. Beatrice and Kieran grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated their silver anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, a testament to the life they had built from such a dark beginning. They still took walks together in the evenings, still held hands like young lovers, still made each other laugh. On a warm summer evening when Beatrice was in her late 50s, she and Kieran sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was their favorite time of day, when the work was done and they could just be together. Kieran's hair was more gray than dark now, and there were lines around Beatrice's eyes, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people they had been when they fell in love. Do you ever regret it? Kieran asked suddenly. The way we met, I mean. Do you wish things had been different? Beatrice thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. No, I would not change anything. Yes, that night was terrible, and yes, Harold was a monster. But everything that happened led me here, to you, to this life. Our children exist because of the choices we both made. How could I regret that? You are a remarkable woman, Beatrice Winters, Kieran said, leaning over to kiss her temple. Have I told you that lately? Not since this morning, Beatrice said with a smile. But I never get tired of hearing it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from orange to pink to purple. Somewhere in the house, they could hear Margaret humming as she prepared supper. The sound of horses moving in the corral drifted on the breeze. The smell of sage and juniper filled the air. It was home. It was peace. It was everything. I love you, Beatrice said softly. I love you too, Kieran replied. Always have, always will. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Beatrice thought back to that terrified girl lying in the snow, certain she was going to die. If she could send a message back to her younger self, what would she say? That it gets better, that survival is possible, that love exists even in the darkest places, that frozen feet can heal and broken hearts can mend, and life can be beautiful beyond imagining. She had been whipped and thrown out barefoot into the frozen night. A cowboy had found her and wept over her suffering. And from that terrible moment had grown a love story that spanned decades, a family that thrived, a legacy that would continue long after she and Kieran were gone. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Years later, when Beatrice and Kieran were both gone, their grandchildren would stand at that marker on the road and tell the story to their own children about the girl who survived the impossible, about the cowboy who saved her, about the love that grew from darkness and became a beacon of light for generations to come. The marker would weather and fade, but the story would live on, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, hope endures, love conquers, and redemption is always possible. The Winters Ranch continued to prosper, passed down through Matthew to his children and their children after them. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original rooms remained, preserved as a reminder of the family's history. The bedroom where Beatrice had recovered was kept exactly as it had been, and every generation of Winter's children was told the story of how it all began. In the town of Aztec, the Winters family was respected and admired. They were known for their integrity, their hard work, and their generosity to those in need. It was said that no one who came to the Winters Ranch asking for help was ever turned away, a tradition that started with Kieran bringing home a broken girl from the side of the road and continued through every generation that followed. The marker on the road became a local landmark. People would stop there and read the inscription, and those who knew the full story would stand in silence for a moment, reflecting on the resilience of the human spirit. Some said that on cold January nights, if you stood at that spot, you could almost feel the presence of something holy, something sacred, a place where death had been defeated and love had triumphed. But the true legacy of Beatrice and Kieran Winters was not in the land they owned, or the marker they placed, or even the children they raised. It was in the example they set, the way they loved each other through good times and bad, the way they built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. They prove that where you come from does not determine where you go, that your past does not have to define your future, that love really can conquer all. On the 100th anniversary of that fateful night, a gathering was held at the marker. Descendants of the Winters family came from all over the country, dozens of people who could trace their lineage back to Beatrice and Kieran. They stood together in the winter sunshine and told stories and laughed and cried and celebrated the legacy of two people who had loved each other well. One of the great-great-grandchildren, a young woman named Emma who had inherited Beatrice's green eyes and determination, gave a speech. "We are all here because of one moment," she said. "One moment when my great-great-grandfather Kieran could have ridden past a body lying by the side of the road. One moment when my great-great-grandmother Beatrice could have given up and let the cold take her. But neither of them did. They chose to live, to love, to build something that would last. And here we all are, 100 years later, proof that their choice mattered, that every choice matters, that love matters most of all." The crowd applauded, and then someone started singing, an old hymn that Beatrice had loved. The voices rose together in the clear winter air, a chorus of gratitude and remembrance. When the song ended, they placed flowers at the base of the marker and then walked together back to the ranch house for a celebration that would have made Beatrice and Kieran proud. Because in the end, that was what it was all about. Not the pain or the suffering or the hardship, but the love and the family and the life that came after. The story of Beatrice and Kieran Winters was not a story about a girl who was thrown out into the snow. It was a story about a woman who survived, about a man who helped her heal, about two people who found each other in the darkness and built a light that would shine for generations. It was a story about hope, about redemption, about the power of love to transform even the darkest circumstances into something beautiful. And it was a story that would never be forgotten, passed down from parent to child, from generation to generation, a reminder that no matter how cold the night, morning always comes. No matter how dark the road, there is always someone who will stop to help. No matter how broken you feel, healing is possible. Beatrice Dawson. Winters lived to be 78 years old. Kieran lived to be 82. They were married for nearly 60 years, and in all that time, the love between them never dimmed. They faced hardships and losses, as all people do. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns, and personal tragedies. But through it all, they had each other, and that was enough. On the day Beatrice died, peacefully in her sleep with Kieran holding her hand, the entire town of Aztec came to the funeral. The church was packed, with people standing in the aisles and out onto the street. Person after person stood up to share stories about Beatrice's kindness, her strength, her generosity, about how she had taken in a neighbor's children when the mother was sick, about how she had organized the women of the town to provide food for families in need, about how she had simply listened when someone needed to talk, offering comfort without judgment. Kieran sat in the front pew, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, tears streaming down his weathered face. When it was his turn to speak, he walked slowly to the front of the church and stood looking out at the gathered crowd. 60 years ago, he said, his voice strong despite his grief, I found a girl lying in the snow. She was broken and hurt and very nearly dead. I brought her home, and my mother helped her heal. But the truth is she healed me too. I did not know I was broken until I met Beatrice, but I was. I was closed off, guarded, afraid to really let anyone in. She changed all that. She taught me how to love fully, how to be vulnerable, how to be truly alive. She gave me 3 beautiful children and more grandchildren than I can count. She gave me a life full of meaning and purpose and joy. And I will miss her every day until I join her again. He paused, his voice breaking. But I am not sorry. I am not sorry for one single day we had together. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I thank God every day that I rode down that road on that particular night, that I saw her when others might have missed her, that I was given the privilege of loving her and being loved by her. Beatrice Winters was the strongest, bravest, most loving person I have ever known, and the world is better for having had her in it. There was not a dry eye in the church when he finished. They buried Beatrice in the cemetery overlooking the San Juan River in a spot where the mountains were visible in the distance. The headstone read simply, Beatrice Dawson Winters, 1864-1942. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She survived the darkness and became the light. Kieran lived for 2 more years after Beatrice died, and those who knew him said a part of him had died with her. He still smiled, still loved his family, still did his work on the ranch. But there was a sadness in his eyes that had not been there before, a longing for the woman who had been his partner and his best friend for 6 decades. When he finally passed away in his sleep one spring morning, his family said it was a mercy. He had missed Beatrice too much to really be happy without her. They buried him beside her, and the entire town turned out for his funeral too. The headstone read, Kieran Matthew Winters, 1858-1944. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. He found her in the snow and loved her forever. Standing there at the joint grave, surrounded by flowers and family, you could almost see them. The girl with frozen feet and the cowboy who wept over her suffering. The young couple falling in love on the porch swing. The middle-aged parents watching their children grow. The elderly couple holding hands as they watched the sunset. All the versions of Beatrice and Kieran layered one over the other like photographs, telling the story of a love that had endured through everything. And if you were very quiet, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear it. The sound of laughter, the murmur of conversation, the rustle of a skirt, and the jingle of spurs, the past and the present and the future all existing together in that one moment, in that one place where two souls had found each other and held on tight and never let go. Because that is what love does. It endures, it persists, it transforms. It takes a girl who should have died in the snow and gives her a life full of joy. It takes a cowboy riding home on a winter night and turns him into a husband, a father, a pillar of his community. It takes tragedy and turns it into triumph. It takes darkness and creates light. The story of Beatrice and Kieran Winters is not just their story. It is the story of everyone who has ever survived something that should have broken them. Everyone who has ever been saved by the kindness of a stranger. Everyone who has ever loved and been loved in return. It is a story about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of compassion, and the way that one person reaching out a hand to help another can change the world. Years continued to pass, decades. The world changed in ways Beatrice and Kieran could never have imagined. Cars replaced horses. Electricity came to the ranch. The town of Aztec grew and modernized. But some things remained constant. The marker on the road. The ranch that had been in the Winters family for generations. The stories passed down from grandparent to grandchild. The knowledge that once, long ago, something miraculous had happened on a cold January night. And every year on January 15th, the Winters family would gather. They would stand at the marker and remember. They would tell the story again for the younger generation, making sure it was never forgotten. They would place flowers and say a prayer and feel grateful for the two people who had started it all. For Beatrice, who had been strong enough to survive. For Kieran, who had been compassionate enough to stop and help. Because in the end, that is all any of us can do. Survive, help each other, love as fully as we can for as long as we are given. The rest takes care of itself. The rest becomes history, becomes legend, becomes a story that echoes through time, reminding us all that hope exists even in the darkest moments, that love can be found in the most unlikely places, and that every ending is really just a new beginning waiting to happen. The story of Beatrice and Kieran Winters, the girl with frozen feet and the cowboy who wept over her suffering, is complete. But it is also never-ending, living on in the hearts and minds of everyone who hears it, inspiring them to be braver, kinder, more loving, to look for those who need help, to offer a hand to the fallen, to believe that redemption is always possible and that love, true love, really can conquer all. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Beatrice and Kieran are together again, young and whole and happy, walking hand in hand through fields of wildflowers, under an endless sky, their love eternal and unbreakable, a testament to the power of two souls who found each other in the darkness and chose to step into the light. This is their story. This is their legacy. This is the proof that even the coldest night cannot freeze a warm heart, that even the deepest pain cannot destroy the human capacity for love, and that sometimes, just sometimes, fairy tales do come true. Not in the way we expect, not without hardship and struggle and sacrifice, but real and true and lasting nonetheless. The frozen feet healed, the tears dried, the love endured, and that made all the difference.